DeepSeek is back. Meta is cutting workers and pouring money into AI infrastructure. Two stories, one pressure system. This is the Synthetic Lens. I'm David Carver. Today, model Shockwave. DeepSeek returns with V4. With me, Marcus Chen on technology and power and Ingrid Halvorsen on economics. Tonight, we're not treating every article as its own story. We're grouping related reporting into two storylines and asking what they mean together. Marcus, start us off with DeepSeek. This is being framed as a return to the scene of last year's crime. What's actually new here?
David, the headline is that DeepSeek is back with preview versions of V4 Pro and V4 Flash. But the real story is the timing. This is arriving almost exactly a year after R1 became the industry's Sputnik moment, the release that made investors ask whether the entire American frontier AI build-out was overpaying for compute.
And that first DeepSeek shock was not just about model quality.
Exactly. If R1 had simply been good, it would have been another strong model. What made it disruptive was the cost claim. It suggested that a lab outside the dominant American ecosystem could get close to frontier performance without matching the capital intensity of OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, or Meta. That is why NVIDIA lost hundreds of billions in market value in a day. The market suddenly had to price in the possibility that capability was getting cheaper faster than expected.
So with V4 Pro and V4 Flash, what are we watching for?
Three things. First, whether the model is meaningfully competitive on hard reasoning and coding tasks. Second, whether the Flash variant makes the speed and cost story credible. And third, whether developers actually move. Benchmarks matter, but adoption is the real proof. If open-source developers start building around V4 the way they built around earlier DeepSeek releases, then the pressure becomes structural.
Pressure on whom?
Everyone's selling intelligence as a premium cloud service. OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Meta, all of them are defending a version of the same story. Frontier AI requires enormous capital, enormous infrastructure, and therefore premium pricing. DeepSeek attacks that story from the side. It says maybe capability can be cheaper, maybe open models can close the gap, and maybe the moat is thinner than the incumbents want investors to believe.
That's the part I keep coming back to. DeepSeek doesn't have to win outright to matter.
Right? It only has to destabilize assumptions. If V4 is good enough, it changes procurement conversations, startup architecture, local deployment plans, and the negotiating leverage developers have with proprietary labs. It also changes the geopolitical read, because the Chinese open-source lab competing near the frontier is not just a technical event. It's an industrial policy event.
So your read is that this is less a product launch and more a pressure test?
That's exactly it. DeepSeek is testing whether last year's shock was a one-off or the beginning of a repeatable pattern.
Ingrid, bring in Meta. The layoffs and the infrastructure spending are being covered as separate stories, but they feel connected.
They are connected, David. Meta is reportedly cutting roughly 10% of its workforce, closing thousands of open roles, and at the same time preparing AI infrastructure spending that could reach $115 to $135 billion this year. That is not a company simply tightening its belt. That's a company changing what it believes creates leverage.
From people to compute.
From people to compute. And that is the uncomfortable economic story. In a normal tech correction, a company cuts because demand slowed, hiring overshot, or margins got squeezed. Here, Meta is cutting while also spending aggressively. The budget is not disappearing. It is being reallocated away from labor toward data centers, semiconductors, GPU clusters, model training, and the infrastructure needed to make AI central to the business.
That makes the layoffs feel less cyclical and more strategic.
Yes, if a company is weak, layoffs say one thing. If a company is pouring over $100 billion into AI infrastructure while cutting workers, layoffs say something different. They say management believes the next unit of advantage comes from compute, not headcount. That does not mean every eliminated role is directly replaced by a model, but it does mean AI is changing the internal capital allocation of one of the largest companies in the world.
And Meta is not just any company in this context.
No. Meta has distribution that OpenAI and Anthropic do not have. Billions of users across Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Messenger. If Meta can make AI a native layer across that social graph, the payoff is enormous. So the company is making a brutally simple trade. Reduce parts of the existing workforce, preserve or expand the AI build-out, and try to make the platform more automated, more personalized, and more defensible.
The political version of this story is going to be ugly.
It will be, because this is the AI labor debate in miniature. Executives will call it transformation, workers will experience it as displacement, investors will ask whether margins improve, regulators will ask whether companies are using AI as a justification for cuts they already wanted to make, and the public will notice that the companies promising abundance are also reducing payrolls.
So Meta becomes the case study.
Exactly. Meta is giving us one of the clearest examples yet of the AI trade. Fewer roles on one side of the ledger, more compute on the other. The question is whether that trade becomes normal across the industry.
Let's pull this together. DeepSeek is pressing from the model efficiency side, while Meta is pressing from the capital allocation side. One story says frontier AI may get cheaper and more open. The other says the biggest platforms are willing to spend staggering sums and cut real jobs to own the infrastructure layer. Marcus, the technical takeaway.
The technical takeaway is that model competition is no longer only about who tops a benchmark. It is about who can make capability cheap enough, available enough, and trusted enough that developers actually reorganize around it. DeepSeek matters because it attacks the cost story. Meta matters because it shows how much incumbents are willing to spend to prevent someone else from owning that story.
Host, Ingrid, the market takeaway?
Follow the budget. Meta's workforce cuts and infrastructure spending are not contradictory. They are the strategy. Labor becomes the adjustable cost, compute becomes the strategic asset. If that logic spreads, AI will not just change products, it will change the internal shape of companies.
And that is why these two stories belong in the same episode. DeepSeek asks whether frontier capability can be made cheaper. Meta asks what companies will sacrifice to own that capability at scale. Between those two questions is the shape of the AI economy. Cheaper intelligence pushing in from the outside, massive infrastructure spending hardening on the inside, and workers caught in the budget line between them. The next thing to watch is behavior. Do developers adopt the new DeepSeek models? Do enterprises use them as leverage against proprietary vendors? Do other platforms follow Meta's labor for compute trade? Do regulators start treating AI infrastructure as a labor market issue rather than just a technology issue? That is the difference between a headline and a regime change. A headline tells you what happened today, a regime change tells you what companies will do differently tomorrow. The links and citations for the reporting we used are in the episode notes. That's The Synthetic Lens. I'm David Carver. We'll keep watching what changes next.